How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States. I'm delighted to have you. Hope you have had a great weekend. The phone number is 877-973-7425 should you wish to be on the program. Very happy to have you. Text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777. Get the live stream, the show notes, everything else. Listen, I have really struggled with starting the show today. Marco Rubio's speech in Munich over the weekend was a grand slam. Lots and lots of buzz and conversation about Rubio's speech. But I actually think there's a more important topic, although maybe less interesting to some of you, but it actually, I think, is the bigger news. And I want to start with the big news of the day, which is not the Rubio speech. And to get to the big news of the day, you've got to know who Eileen Gu is. If you don't know who she is an American citizen who has betrayed her country, being bought off by the Chinese communists to ski for the Chinese communists. And she is not, doing as well in the Olympics as maybe some people expected her to, and she's whining about her practice and whining. And the media, it is very interesting, has made her a darling. She was on the cover of Time magazine, which should have been focused on American Olympians and instead focused on the traitor Olympian who's skiing for the Chicoms. We know, by the way, that she got paid by the Chinese. It got posted online and then rapidly deleted. All eyes are on her. She was second in qualifying and will be up against a gold medal contender. And they really are trying to make her a star. And this gets to the point of why I think this is the big news of the day. The United States of America has won 17 medals. It's in fourth place right now. Typically, the European countries do the best in the Winter Olympics. The United States can as well, sometimes dominate. We've still got some events to go that we're good in. We have 5 gold, 8 silver, 4 bronze for 17. Netherlands has 12 medals. Italy has 27 medals. Italy has 22 medals. Norway has 27 medals. Now, this is in Italy. They have a home court advantage to a degree. So in total medals, the United States and Japan are tied. In gold medals, we are in fourth place, tied with Sweden and Switzerland, 5 gold medals. Where is China? China's not in the top 10. China's not in the top 15. China is in 19th with 0 gold medals, tied with Poland, Latvia, New Zealand, Finland, Bulgaria, Belgium, and a whole lot of other countries. Even Kazakhstan has more gold medals than China, and China's total, 4. China has 4 gold medals in this Olympics. The United States, or 4 medals total. The United States has 17. China has 0 gold medals. The United States has 5. So much of what we're hearing about China is a propaganda campaign. On Friday, in my final half hour, I was discussing how so much of our fears about AI are actually Chinese propaganda. There are definitely concerns. Now, let's have a nuanced case here. There are concerns about AI. It is going to cost jobs. It is going to be disruptive. It can be dangerous. But a lot of the overarching fears are being seeded by Chinese propaganda efforts in this country. A lot of them through environmental groups, whether it's the water usage, the power usage, things like that. Some people have natural concerns about it, but a lot of those concerns were sparked by TikTok videos of people who happen to have been put in there by the Chinese-backed algorithm to scare people about AI. The Chinese are trying to win a propaganda campaign. There was a story in the New York Times beginning of last week or 2 weeks ago, rather, about the amount of scientific journals and reports now coming out of China and how they are outpacing American research output. And multiple entities, not just from the United States, but from around the world, have come out and said, wait a second, the actual Chinese research is subpar. They're getting it published. And the New York Times counted the publishing, but didn't actually count the quality of the work. And so Chinese universities have been elevated above American universities based on research output, not on research quality. Even the Europeans, who don't like us very much right now, are willing to say that our research quality far exceeds Chinese research quality. Now, all of this comes to a head with Eileen Gu and the PR campaign to make her some cause celeb for China, where what did China have to do? This is a pattern of China over time, is it steals other people's stuff. And in this case, China bought off an American and is now using the media around the world to make her into a cause celeb as some sort of significant athlete for China, when she actually she's an American who had to be paid by China to become, she said something like she's a Chinese citizen for 2 weeks every 4 years or some such nonsensical quote. Otherwise, she wants to be an American citizen. In China, you're not allowed to have dual citizenship. She's either an American or a Chinese. The fact that the Chinese put her on the payroll to try to give them a leg up on competition tells you China's not very good at winning anything. They got to bribe, buy, cajole, and steal to get ahead. China lacks the intellectual capacity to be originalist. If anything, China is like AI. AI cannot compete on the creative ideas. AI takes everybody else's ideas and iterates and sometimes finds better paths forward, as China does. But China is not super creative. China steals our intellectual property. China steals the world's intellectual property. They modify it for their own use. Sometimes they find better ideas in the process. They're able to refine it. But China, it does essentially what the AI models are doing. It takes what everybody else has done and synthesizes it together to find a different path. Actual origination of creativity is something China has long lacked, which all communist societies have that in common, by the way. I just think it's very interesting that in the last 2 weeks, there have been major PR campaigns about how awesome China is. In fact, Steve Ratner, I think it was, published something in, I think it was the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, one about how China is so far ahead. They put him up at a 5-star hotel in Beijing, and he went and saw this bleeding edge factory. Well, yeah, they take everybody to the same factory. It's like a Potemkin village to show you this. The communists know how to do Potemkin villages well, and that's what China's done. You go out into the hinterland of China, and it is poor. It is decrepit. Things are falling apart. The Chinese high-speed rail lines have constant problems. China just launched an aircraft carrier last year. It broke apart. All of this is not to say that we shouldn't have concerns about China. We really should. They've hacked our power grid. The Chinese have, the Canadians are now realizing what we've long known, that a lot of the cranes that have come in from China are compromised and are not only surveilling what's coming into Canadian ports as they did American ports, but they could also be used in a war to cripple the ability to unload and load ships. The Chinese have put spy cameras around the United States. They've tried to buy up land near American military installations. They have been sending their weather balloons over the United States. You name it, the Chinese have been doing it. They've been trying to steal our technology, compromise our technology, compromise our power grid, compromise our water grid, compromise our pipelines. They have completely compromised our telecom grid to the extent that members of Congress are now advised not to have private conversations on cell phones anymore. But a lot of the big, bad China stuff turns out not to be as spooky and scary. They're trying to scare us online. They're trying to make us believe that they're dominant, and a lot of people are falling for it. Look at Code Pink. It appears that the founding member of Code Pink, who's married to a communist who now lives in China and has been funding the Chinese with his personal wealth, is now trying to lead influencer tours to China, people who might be sympathetic to the Chinese Communist Party. We are seeing at greater scale what the Soviets did. It was easier for Hollywood in the 80s to make the Soviets the bad guys because there weren't production houses in the Soviet Union and they didn't have a big economy. But so much of the American media, so much of our sports entertainment, so much of our American movie entertainment can't make the Chinese the bad guys because we are dependent on the Chinese box office for money. Our cultural elite in this country have hoarded themselves out to China in such a way that make them economically dependent on China, and the Chinese actually can't muster enough to actually compete with America. Even at the Olympics, they're having to buy off Americans to ski for China to make themselves look good, and we'll see if she can even win a medal. As the Chinese get closer and closer to trying to take over Taiwan, my suspicion is we're going to see an even larger PR campaign within the American media to try to tell us China is something it is not. They have built a Potemkin village and have fooled the American elite, many of whom actually like China more than they like us. Back in the 1980s and the 70s, it was very obvious that America's intellectual elite favored the Soviets to us. They don't like democracy. They don't like freedom. You have all the Democrats here. They badmouth democracy all the time. Democracy's under attack. We got to preserve our democracy. But they fawn over China, which doesn't have a democracy, which is kind of the tell. They're not concerned about democracy. They're concerned about their power. And it's playing out in editorial pages and in how the news is reported, how people like Eileen Gu are propped up by the American media as some sort of great celebrity Olympian when she's actually betrayed her own country to go ski for money for China. Keep your eyes out there. And let's go back to our technical capacities here. We're seeing a massive propaganda campaign in this country to degrade our energy capacity. We'll get into what Gavin Newsom is doing to help China in the next hour. But there's a massive scare campaign being run in the American press about global warming, about coal-fired plants, about natural gas, trying to get us to just rely on solar and wind. Much of that solar and wind technology being made in China, probably hacked by them already and compromised to shut down our power grids if they install it here. There's the Chinese propaganda campaign about their military strength, the Chinese propaganda campaign about how much better they are at us at so much of the world that we just uncovered another biolab, this time in Las Vegas, where multiple people got sick. Apparently they had Ebola and HIV and COVID strains in this biolab. You've had Chinese scientists try to send fungus into the United States that could wipe out our crop production. The orange blight in Florida came over from China. It's killing orange crops in Florida. It came from the Chinese. The Chinese are at war with us. We are acting as if we're not really at war with them. This is a long Chinese war, and the forefront of the Chinese war is a propaganda campaign being embraced by the American press corps, elevating this Chinese Olympian who's actually an American and lying to us. And I think the proof is in the pudding when you look at the Olympics. China is not competitive in the way China claims to be with its athletes, with its economy, or with its technology. And yet the American media keeps trying to tell you how awesome they are. We are being played. Hello and welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, let me go to Jim. Welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm an old-time Rush listener, and now I'm hooked on you.
Thank you very much.
Well, one thing I was going to talk to you about is the China patents. Well, China never had patent laws till about 2013, 2014. I can't remember exactly. I owned a company, and we had patents, and we sold Home Depot and Lowe's a lot of goods in the gutter aisle. And I was going over to China to check all my factories, and actually I'd gotten a call from another Chinese factory that said, hey, look, we want to meet with you. We can produce some of your products. And so, of course, I'm over there. So I went and met with him, and he went through all his gamut, and the owner was older. He didn't speak good English, and so I was basically talking to the son.
Jim, I got about a minute.
And he sat there and passed me a piece of paper saying, we have your patent in China now. You can't make this at the other factories because we own the China factory. And I was flabbergasted. And I went to a lawyer immediately after it in China. And he told me, hey, you're safe. Don't worry about it. But they've never had patents over there till the last 10, 13 years.
It was international pressure, actually, that brought them to do that, and they don't respect the patents. Jim, your story is one I have heard from so many different people, something very, very similar, that you go over, you start producing in China, next thing you know, it's the Chinese have stolen your designs on stuff. That's why a lot of American clothing manufacturers, by the way, have moved out of China to Vietnam and elsewhere, where the Vietnamese communists actually are much more respectful of your property interests. A lot of clothing manufacturers moved out of China because the Chinese were remarketing, repackaging, and then finding other companies to sell your same product through back to the United States. Just absolutely bizarre. Now, let me tell you about Old Glory Bank. They're an American bank, and they will protect your right to bank. That was why they were started, was to protect your right to bank. As progressives increasingly in the country tried to target people and get people to stop doing business with conservatives. If you go to oldglorybank.com/Eric, oldglorybank.com/ERICK, you can sign up with Old Glory Bank. I'm actually headed out of town on Friday. Have to go to take a trip to Las Vegas. I'm sure I'll play a little bit of craps out there. If I win any money, I will be able to deposit it back in my bank account at Old Glory Bank with a QR code where I can go to one of 88,000 retail locations, drop it off. They're an online bank, but they make it easy to deposit cash. You go to oldglorybank.com/Eric, oldglorybank.com/ERICK. You can sign up with Old Glory Bank, and you'll be able to take advantage if you're, particularly for active duty military, veteran, first responder, great deals with them. Active duty military, they'll waive some fees on the premium accounts. If you're a business, they're very, very, very helpful with your businesses, very hands-on. They want to get to know your business, so when it comes time for lending, they understand your operations. oldglorybank.com/ERICK. Go check them out today, oldglorybank.com/Eric. They really are my bank. I got a checking account with them and a savings account with them, and you can too. Member FDIC, equal housing lender, terms and conditions apply. Greetings, welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I'd be very, very happy to have you. This weekend was Valentine's Day weekend. We were actually supposed to go out of town. My son came home Friday from school with fever, and my wife wasn't feeling fantastic. So we stuck around the house, didn't do anything. My wife and I had been invited to the neighbor's house for dinner. We declined because we were going to town, and I was like, we're not going to go carry fever next door. But the kid is fine now. He was like, I think I have COVID. Everybody at school has COVID. And we're like, oh, great. And he was sick on Saturday night or Friday night and didn't feel great on Saturday. And by yesterday, felt fine again. That tends to be the way it works these days. You all know how kids work. So we do absolutely nothing on Valentine's Day typically because, Valentine's Day is a day that people expect you to celebrate Saint Valentine, who married a couple and then was beaten to within an inch of his life and beheaded. And we're supposed to buy each other candy and nonsense because a man got beheaded by the Romans. And I'm just like, that's one of those Hallmark holidays where they want you to just buy stuff. My wife and I love each other dearly. We have no need to go out and participate in a consumer-driven holiday economy. And then you get to today, which is not President's Day. Everybody talks about today as President's Day. Officially, today is Washington's birthday. We do not celebrate all of the presidents. Many of the presidents are not worth celebrating, including Joe Biden, Jimmy Carter, and Woodrow Wilson. There's no reason to celebrate presidents. We celebrate one president. Officially, Congress has declared today Washington's birthday, the one indispensable president of the United States. And all these people out there trying to get us to celebrate President's Day. There's no such thing as President's Day in the official federal government, and we should all get it out of our mouths that today is President's Day. I saw a commercial this morning. It's a President's Day sale to buy a mattress. It's not a President's Day on the books. It's Washington's birthday. Well, while it was, Washington's birthday weekend, and it was Valentine's Day, Marco Rubio was in Europe giving his Valentine to the Europeans, and some people didn't like what he had to say, and they were very upset and snotty about it. And actually, the right reaction is that Marco Rubio's speech is one for the ages. Rubio continues to impress me as Secretary of State. In fact, everyone tends to be impressed, and a lot of people are shaping up a Rubio-Vance rivalry in 2028. I wouldn't be surprised if they come out of the gate running as a ticket and try to shut everybody else out. Reportedly, they get along well behind the scenes, even if they don't necessarily see eye to eye on stuff. Rubio has a remarkably strategic vision for trying to box out China and Russia. It's one of the reasons President Trump is sending the Gerald Ford, the most advanced and biggest aircraft carrier, to the Middle East. Is I think he really does think that we need to disrupt Iran so profoundly that they can't help the Russians and Chinese. He's already boxing out Cuba. He's boxed out Venezuela. Ending Iran's capacity to make war with Russia and China would be fantastic. Rubio went to Europe, and obviously the Europeans are bristling under Donald Trump. And essentially, Marco Rubio presented them Donald Trump with philosophy. My chief complaint with our president is that he doesn't actually have a governing philosophy. Everything is whim and gut driven without impulse control. There's not like a total grand philosophical vision by the president. In fact, now some of you will get very defensive about this, but it's true. You talk to the president and he would agree with you that there's not a grand philosophical vision. The president doesn't believe he has time for that, thinks it's intellectual nonsense to go there. I don't. I think it gives a coherence and an understandability to policy. It gives a predictability that Western culture needs to operate at functionally. The president shifts, goes back and forth. It's based on a whim. He says common sense is how he does it, but that common sense can sometimes have overlapping cross purposes. What Marco Rubio tried to do in Europe is give some philosophical underpinnings to the president's foreign policy, which I actually think the president's foreign policy is better than a lot of his domestic policy. This is some of Rubio. Let me play you a couple of clips here.
National security, which this conference is largely about, is not merely a series of technical questions. How much we spend on defense or where, how we deploy it, these are important questions. They are. But they are not the fundamental one. The fundamental question we must answer at the outset is, what exactly are we defending? Because armies do not fight for abstractions. Armies fight for a people. Armies fight for a nation. Armies fight for a way of life. And that is what we are defending. A great civilization that has every reason to be proud of its history.
He's right, although way of life can be an abstraction. I would quibble with him a little bit, but overall that gives a real philosophy to what's going on here. A little more.
The year that my country was founded, Lorenzo and Catalina Giraldi lived in Casal Monferrato in the Kingdom of Piedmont, Sardinia. And Jose and Manuela Reina lived in Sevilla, Spain. I don't know what, if anything, they knew about the 13 colonies which had gained their independence from the British Empire. But here's what I'm certain of. They could have never imagined that 250 years later, one of their direct descendants would be back here today on this continent as the chief diplomat of that infant nation. And yet here I am, reminded by my own story that both our histories and our fates will always be linked. Together, we rebuilt a shattered continent in the wake of 2 devastating world wars. When we found ourselves divided once again by the Iron Curtain, the Free West linked arms with the courageous dissidents struggling against tyranny in the East to defeat Soviet communism. We have fought against each other, then reconciled, then fought, then reconciled again. And we have bled and died side by side on battlefields from Kapyong to Kandahar. Because for us Americans, our home may be in the Western Hemisphere, but we will always be a child of Europe.
Proud love that line. One last one from Marco Rubio.
We want allies who can defend themselves so that no adversary will ever be tempted to test our collective strength. This is why we do not want our allies to be shackled by guilt and shame. We want allies who are proud of their culture and of their heritage, who understand that we are heirs to the same great and noble civilization, and who together with us are willing and able to defend it. And this is why we do not want allies to rationalize the broken status quo rather than reckon with what is necessary to fix it.
Now, what's more telling is the reaction to Marco Rubio and tying all of us together to Western culture. Because, you know, the New York Times pushed back or had somebody push back on Rubio and said, well, actually, in the last 10, 15 years, the Europeans have imported a lot of people from Turkey and Afghanistan and elsewhere, and now you've got a Muslim population, about 10%. It's not really Western anymore. That was Rubio's point. A lot of Western European leaders have decided essentially to commit suicide for their nation. Just let's look at Great Britain. Just as an example, in Great Britain, the National Health Service has now been advised to stop discouraging first cousin marriages. That's incest. Under the laws of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, of the United States, and of most of the Western world, marrying your first cousin is incest. And the government in Great Britain has urged the National Health Service to stop discouraging it because so many Muslim immigrants engage in first cousin marriage. You're not going to hear about that in the news broadcasts of the BBC and elsewhere in large part. You're going to hear about it from the tabloid papers in Great Britain because so many of the mouthpieces of the British establishment have also, like the British government, decided that it can't rock the boat with these Islamists. There are increasing no-go zones in Europe where you do not go if you are not Muslim. They have allowed a massive Muslim population into Western Europe, and now they are scared of it. The Austrian premier the other day suggested that Austrian women now need to wear headscarves in solidarity with the Muslim women so the Muslim women are not getting harassed. And what's actually happening in Austria is that non-Muslim women who do not cover their heads are getting harassed when they go near Muslim no-go zones. That's the truth. That's happening. And what is most amazing to me is the amount of energy that goes into the Western media elite denying reality, denying these things are true. The president of the European Union came out just the other day and insisted that they will continue to fight against American social media companies that allow people to just say things without accountability on social media. Here's one that I thought was fake, and it actually is true. I saw this headline. It's like, there's no way this is true. And maybe it isn't, but I Googled around enough to look like, yeah, actually, this is being reported in the British media. A British man swallowed a leaf and spit it out and was fined for littering. He was walking down the road, a leaf went into his mouth, and he just spit it out. Then and there, a police officer saw him and fined him. Some of you will say, Erickson, that can't be true. I thought it was not true. It looks like it's true. Maybe it's not true, but here's one that's real. A British citizen has gone to jail for 10 years for mean tweets, and a British immigrant has actually gone to jail for less time for murdering someone in their own community because that person's Islamic. In the Netherlands, a man who stabbed his girlfriend 247 times has been given 5 years in prison on the finding that he was actually a Muslim immigrant who had low IQ. The white people of Europe are engaged in cultural suicide, and that is what Marco Rubio is warning about. And it's very telling that the New York Times would come along and denounce Marco Rubio's speech because, Europe is now 10% Muslim, so it's not really part of the Western world order anymore. And that's kind of Rubio's point. The European elite have chosen to leave the Western world order, not the United States. The United States is proudly willing to defend the Western world order, but we want Europe not to commit cultural suicide. The Eastern Europeans are much more likely to stand with the United States on these issues than the Western European countries that have imported mass immigrant labor. And now they're just, as long as they get the labor from them, they're not worried about their cultural upheaval that they're going through. This is why there are so many far-right parties that are rising in Europe, and the European elite and the world's press corps compare them to the Nazis, not because they're Nazis, but because they oppose the mass immigration. Look at Giorgia Meloni, who was accused of being the second coming of Mussolini, if not Hitler, when she was getting elected. The entirety of the Western press corps vilified this woman as a Nazi or a Mussolini fascist. She's now one of those popular leaders in Europe. She has stamped down on immigration into Italy, and otherwise, she's a pretty run-of-the-mill conservative leader. That's what Rubio's point is. And then in response to this, you get nut jobs like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez who prove how dim-witted she is. Listen to part of this.
You are starting to see the ascent of the right, even in places like Munich. Marco Rubio's speech was a pure appeal to Western culture. My favorite part was when he said that American cowboys came from Spain.
I thought they came from Winnetou, but
I believe the Mexicans and descendants of African enslaved peoples would like to have a word.
I don't even need to play you the rest of the quote. Marco Rubio is actually right. Who brought horses to the Western Hemisphere? The Spanish. Cowboy culture came from Spain, not from enslaved people from Africa. The Mexicans got it from the Spaniards. That's documented history, and she seems too ignorant to know it. Here's another bit of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's ignorance.
We look at what happened in Venezuela, for example. It is not a remark on who Maduro was as a leader. He canceled elections. He was an anti-democratic leader. That doesn't mean that we can kidnap a head of state and engage in acts of war just because the nation is below the equator.
Venezuela, not a single part of it is below the equator. So she doesn't understand history and she doesn't understand geography, and she is billed as some sort of intellectual heavyweight by the left. She's not ready for prime time, but they will cover for her as they covered for Joe Biden because she's on the left, even though she's a dimwit. Marco Rubio will get vilified for calling out what's actually happening in Europe and telling the truth about it and saying, we don't want to break up with Europe, but you got to fix the problems in Europe. We can't fix them for you. And he'll be vilified by the media because the media has embraced a decline that Marco Rubio has chosen to reject. This hour of the program brought to you by Van Allen Golf. If you or someone you love is into golf, they need to know about the Van Allen Golf equipment. Their new putter out is incredible. It's a blade putter. I have seen the prototype for the mallet as well that's coming. Go to vanallengolf.com, ALLEN, vanallengolf.com. Y'all, their putter technology is exquisite. It actually does matter. The putter is the one piece of your golf equipment that actually does the heavy lifting for you. Everything else is about your swing. The putt relies on the weight of the putter, and theirs is incredible. vanallengolf.com, or text the word golf to 33777. Y'all are going to have to forgive me. I have to talk to my local community here for just a moment. The rest of you can eavesdrop. If you live in Middle Georgia where I live, tomorrow is a special election. And there is an actual communist, and I don't say that lightly. I don't say that to scare you. The man is actually really proudly a Marxist on the ballot in a very Republican district. And the problem is that the Stacey Abrams group, the Fair Fight Georgia, and the Working Families Party, which is a far-left political party, have rented basically every 15-passenger van in Middle Georgia and are driving people to early voting and plan to do it to the polls tomorrow to try to beat a Republican in a Republican seat. The Republicans should get 60% of the vote. And the Democrats are overwhelmingly turning out, and the Republican machine is not doing what they need to help Steve McNeil. McNeil can only do so much. McNeil is a Republican. He's a good guy. I'm supporting him. If you live in Middle Georgia, tomorrow is Election Day, and you need to go vote. Monroe County, Houston County, Bibb County, Crawford County, Upson County, you got to go vote. Peach County, you got to stop a communist from representing a Republican area. It is the most mind-numbing thing to watch that the Republican groups are not doing nearly what the far-left groups are doing. They're trying to drive turnout. You got to go vote tomorrow for Stephen McNeil, please. In Middle Georgia, go vote for Stephen McNeil. He needs every single vote tomorrow in the election. The turnout machine for the Democrats right now in Georgia is incredible. Republicans should take notice of this. Now, let me tell you about Eden Pure and their thunderstorm. You can get 3 of them and save $200 at EdenPureDeals.com. It's an air purifier. It wipes out noxious odors. It traps pollen, dust, pet dander. It kills bacteria and viruses. I use it as an odor eliminator. In fact, I'll be going to take a trip this week and have it in my travel bag because it's small. I can keep it if someone smoked in a hotel room or rental car. It'll wipe out those odors. Used it on my back porch yesterday. I smoked an incredible brisket, but the smoke got into my back porch again. The window didn't seal well, and I used the Eden Pure Thunderstorm, and it got rid of the smoke odor. It just works. You go to EdenPureDeals.com, and you put in the discount code ERIC3, E-R-I-C-K, the number 3, no space, at EdenPureDeals.com. You get 3 of them, and you save $200. They have a money-back guarantee. If they don't eliminate the odors you want them to eliminate, they have a money-back guarantee. Find out all the details at EdenPureDeals.com.